Chicken out, I'm still here. I shortened what you have to do, so you'll be pleased. As in, it's there.
Is it?
Yeah. Okay. They printed it. I've sent an updated version because I realised that I'd overlapped some of my slides with what you were going to say. So I've now tweaked it.
Well, that's
much
fine.
shorter.
So
Much shorter. Less
is that
words.
the same version that...
I hope so, because I sent one this morning.
Yeah, it had been
It must be.
adapted. So
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
check some.
Yeah. Yes.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no Mumbai. Oh, Mumbai, the what? The ME.
Was Mumbai where you did your...
No, it was in Goa.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a Goa Medical College.
The
It's the
MD.
University of Mumbai. No, it's like affiliated to the university, but it's studying in Goa.
I better watch
Get
myself.
it right.
It's fine.
I'll just say what you say. If they're pre-approved.
Stick to the script.
Stick to the
No,
script.
that's not what I've got to go to, so I just...
Hi there. You hosting the event? Okay, that's good, that's good.
And I need to get to that.
How we recording Hi there.
That's our live stream at the moment.
Okay. So see what I mean?
I see.
It's about 10 seconds behind you at the moment.
This one is going to do it from around.
She's right.
She's small, she's shorter. The problem is, as you can see there, because that's not a real image. What we have, that's an overlay. So if you look in front of it, you can understand roughly where that little bit of white is there.
And then on the microphone, it's going to be off. All we need to do is turn it on and be quite close actually. It'll be fine. Yeah.
And there we go.
Oh yes, I'm here in the right place.
Like I say,
It's live by the way, so we're streaming everything. And we'll start in 10 minutes. Yep.
Okay.
And then
If not, Norwich are quite good. Norwich are really good. Well, you said 7:30.
I thought it was someone else doing it.
Well, there is, I'll probably have my breakfast there. Yeah, I won't eat, let's have breakfast.
Yeah, so this is for Lincoln standard, not you.
Isn't your family here?
Only my nephew Sean.
Which is your nephew? Oh, I was going to say hello.
yeah, no, you're absolutely fine to move around anywhere underneath that skin.
Move too much. I'm probably going to be back.
Absolutely perfect. That's fine. Yeah, no, we're all right then. Excellent.
oh, no pressure.
No pressure from us. No, that's the same otherwise.
So that's going to be on the handheld. You notice that all you have to do is hold it quite close. Actually, almost touching with your lips. Very close. And your spot is somewhere there. This is where yeah, this is the spot.
Okay.
Otherwise, the reason is that we're too tall because the screen crosses off.
Oh, nice. Thank you very much.
No problem. People do that and then you get damaged microphones.
Oh, I can see where it's good.
So be careful.
And switch it on.
Yeah. 7 minute wire.
I'm just sitting at the back.
Oh, right. Morning, Rosalind.
Oh, yes. No, because you know, started off like, yeah, because we must be using the same format. And you've got Tom, I don't know, this will be, yeah, yes, yeah. So I don't think the right connection. Yeah. I don't resurrect the old and just make some adaptations. Oh yes.
Yes, they have another put into that. Oh yes, yeah, we need some more.
How are you?
Mid-afternoon. I was thinking after every fight, people should all be standing up.
Don't do it when the student comes in.
No,
You get a complaint.
off the floor.
I stood up with him. It was a complaint. I keep this up, he's standing up, leaving his arms about it. Hold on a minute.
We have had for the assessment
Dumpy face. Well, I had one as if they just smiled at me. I knew it was a problem. So, yeah, it was a big couple of years ago. You can't, there's no way you can.
Well, the doctor got the neutral impression and I smiled at them. Encouragement to leave.
Alison, Bill, I think I can't hear.
A couple of things with
Yeah.
the I think when I was an associate dean, just wasn't able to go.
Favourite people.
So good evening and a warm welcome to all of you. I'm Professor Dylan Edwards. I'm the Pro-Vice Chancellor for the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences. It's a great pleasure to welcome everybody here tonight. So we're here for the inaugural lecture from Professor Veena Rodriguez. Veena is an overseas medical graduate with an MD in preventive and social medicine. She worked as a clinical academic, first at the Goa Medical College and later at the medical school in Manipal, South India. In 1994, Veena received a scholarship to complete an MPhil in epidemiology at the University of Cambridge. She then joined the Institute of Cancer Research in Sutton, Surrey, and as a medical epidemiologist in their cancer screening evaluation unit. Veena completed her speciality training in public health medicine, working across St George's Medical School, London, and the East Surrey Health Authority, transferring to Norfolk in 2002. She became a public health consultant in late 2002, working across Norwich Primary Care Trust and the Norwich Medical School. And in 2008, Veena became a senior lecturer in public health and an honorary consultant at Norfolk Primary Care Trust. After several years spent working across service and academic public health, the NHS reorganisation in 2013 led to her employment becoming fully based at the Norwich Medical School. So here you are now. So up to the present time, becoming up to date. So Veena is now the head of the Medical Education Department, the course director of the UEA MClinEd program, and the faculty lead for online learning. She's an accredited supervisor within the East of England Public Health Speciality Training Programme and chairs the UK network of public health educators in medical schools. She's also a fellow of the Academy of Medical Educators and a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy. In 2016, Veena was promoted to Professor of Public Health and Medical Education at the Norwich Medical School. She's developed several innovations in teaching, which we're going to hear about tonight, including a number of massive open online courses on the FutureLearn platform with the Open University. Her portfolio of work interests and activities now focus on undergraduate and postgraduate public health and the development, training and mentoring of clinical educators across the entire spectrum of health professional careers. So please join me now in welcoming Professor Veena Rodriguez to give her inaugural lecture, Pedagogy Before Technology, Trials and Tribulations of an Early Adopter. Welcome, Veena.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Dylan. And thank you all for coming here today. I have a special thank you for all those who are watching on the live stream, especially those who are outside the UK, and I know a large number of them are watching. So it's a pleasure to be here and a real privilege to be able to give this talk to you today. So thank you all for coming. I want to start by going back to my roots. I grew up in Goa, a tiny state on the southwest coast of India. I'm not sure how well anybody knows it, but it's a really popular tourist spot for UK people. So you might have been there, in fact. Anyway, so I studied at Manovikas, a school whose name roughly translates to development of the mind. And that it definitely did. I think I learned to really work hard, to aim high, with the freedom to be really creative and to think big. The school really gave me a great foundation to build on. So after my schooling, I decided to do medicine, and I studied at the Goa Medical College, which is one of the oldest medical schools in Southeast Asia. When I graduated, I decided to join the public health specialty, which was called preventive and social medicine in those days. And I completed my residency in that specialty and also obtained an MD in it. But it wasn't, at that time, my choice of career was a combination of several factors. And it was only when I moved to Kasturba Medical College in Manipal, South India, that I actually began to feel like this was the specialty for me and something I wanted to do long term. So at Manipal, the job was a combination of academic and service public health, in that we taught undergraduate and postgraduate medical students. But equally, we delivered outreach clinics through a network of rural maternity and child welfare homes in underserved villages around the medical school, where the transport networks were not too good, and we were the only health service they had available to them. So we did that in rotation around the clinics. And it was an interesting time because it was like a typical multidisciplinary team led by community medicine, but with registrars in obstetrics and gynecology and a registrar in pediatrics and interns coming with us to the community to offer antenatal care or under 5 clinics to the babies and so on. So it was a really great experience of an MDT at a very early age, very long ago, in fact. And those homes came up because of community action. So in those days, because the transport network was not so well developed, the homes were manned by an auxiliary nurse midwife from the local community. They had a 10-bed postnatal ward, so she could do the deliveries there. They could stay in the postnatal period and then go back home. So there was no going to hospital involved. And if there was any problem, it was the registrars who came there to help with the difficult deliveries. And then if they couldn't do it, they'd take the patients back with them to the hospital. So it seemed to work quite well, and it was a really interesting experience doing these clinics in the community. It was in this job that I made my first 2 observations about medical education. The first was the power of peer observation. At the time when I joined the department, the thing I was most excited about was teaching the medical students, of whom there were about 200 in each class. But the head of my department said no, that he'd like to observe me teaching the postgraduate students first, before he could let me loose on the medical students. I didn't understand it at the time, but of course now looking back, I think what a clever man. He let me start with mature adult learners who came there for a purpose, who were self-motivated and made the job easy for me. And of course, it was nothing like that with the undergraduates. So looking back now, I can see the value of his peer observation and the tips he gave me then to sort of be able to teach undergraduate students. And the second observation was that assessment drives learning. So through my lectures, I used to have this habit of looking back at past papers just to make sure that I'm sort of hitting the right level with the students. And then I had this habit of discussing past exam questions in the class. And so, of course, my lectures became really popular. And I was beginning to think, oh, I can see the students are coming in now. Perhaps it's because of the questions. But of course, now looking back, we all know assessment drives learning. And at the time, it was just working for me, so I was intuitively doing it. Anyway, my interest in epidemiology and biostatistics grew particularly because we had international research links in that department, and we had several visiting faculty. So I started to get really interested in this subject. And at the time, there was no postgraduate degree in epidemiology available in India. So I was looking abroad for this, and Cambridge had only just launched an MPhil in epidemiology. So I thought, well, why not apply there? I always wanted to aim high, and so of course I got admission. And then I was really fortunate to get a scholarship from the Cambridge Commonwealth Trust and the Durham Hinduja Cambridge Trust, who fully funded my education there. So I came over to do an MPhil in epidemiology at Cambridge. And this was a really interesting experience. So, it was a big culture shock, the fact that students were allowed to debate, discuss, challenge even their teachers. It was shocking for me, having come from India, where, everything your teacher said to you, you like a disciple took that on, and the teacher could do no wrong. So I think I found it really hard in the first month or two, but then it became enjoyable and interesting and exciting to be able to do that. And I recognize the value of it now. I had lovely teachers as well: Nick Day, Carol Brain, Katie Kaur, Stephen Duffy, who actually made me understand P less than 0.05 and the significance of statistical tests. Things like just, it was one of those difficult concepts. I think I finally understood those things. So they were marvelous teachers. I had a great time. And just towards the end of my course, I decided to apply for a job I saw advertised in the BMJ. At the time, I don't know what I was thinking, really. I just thought I'd try it and see what happens, probably because I was an international student and had not much to do on weekends, so other than sightseeing and stuff. So I applied for this job, and to my great surprise, I was invited for an interview. And the job was at the Institute of Cancer Research in Sutton, Surrey. And they had a little unit called the Cancer Screening Evaluation Unit that evaluated the national screening programs. Now, I went to the interview, which was great fun. We laughed, we talked, they asked me a few questions, I answered them, and I was really lucky because they asked me questions on things we'd done in class. And I thought, amazing, and left not thinking anything about it. And then when I got called saying, you've got the job, I thought, what do I do now? I hadn't planned it at all. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I decided to take the job. Partly it was because I wanted to see what the job would be like, but equally I think because my background had been completely in maternal and child health, and then I came to this course which focused completely on chronic disease epidemiology, and I felt a little bit out of depth, I must say. So I thought nothing like hammering in the knowledge and understanding of chronic disease epidemiology by taking a job in it. And so that was the logic for applying for that job. Now, the first role I had in that unit was actually as the medical epidemiologist verifying colorectal cancer deaths in the Nottingham population-based randomized controlled trial that was evaluating fecal occult blood test screening for bowel cancer. So that was my first job. And the evidence from that trial actually led to the establishment of the National Bowel Cancer Screening Program. So it's amazing to see, I was involved in the very early stages, and now it is an actual national cancer screening program. That feels great to see. But apart from colorectal cancer, I also did a little bit of work on interval cancers within the breast cancer screening program, and also something on oral cancer. Now, this was great. We were working with large data sets, and I loved the computing side of the job and the queries to get the results out of the data. I loved that. But I just felt it was a little bit too boring for me. It was too quiet sitting behind a desk. And anybody who knows me well will probably know that that's not an environment I flourish in. I began to miss my specialty, and I began to miss teaching and the interaction with the students. So I tried organizing little teaching sessions for my colleagues, but even that got a bit boring after some time. And so I suppose it wasn't really a surprise that I decided to enter specialty training in public health back again in the UK. And that led me to St. George's, where I got a clinical lecturer post. Now, in those days, my training was actually split between St. George's, 50-50, and then the East Surrey Health Authority in Epsom, because I had to do both the academic and service side of it. And it was great, just having this combination of academic and service public health. It was an interesting time, but I know how hard it was to keep both sides equally balanced. And I did really try hard to keep them joined up. But if anybody here has worked in a split post, you'd probably know how difficult it is to really keep both ends going. yeah, so that was really hard, I think. Anyway, towards the end of my training, I came to Norwich. Now, I came to Norwich with a warning. Apparently, Norwich is the graveyard of all ambition. I was told this, are you sure you really want to go? And I said, definitely, but I'll let you know how I get on. Now, I don't, in my mind, there is no doubt that it was the best move I made, but you can judge for yourself at the end of this talk about whether it was the graveyard of ambition for me or not. Anyway, so there it was. At the end of my training, I saw this advert for this post that I dreamed of through my whole career, a post that was joint between academic and service public health. So I saw this consultant advert for a consultant at Norwich Primary Care Trust working across the medical school. And I thought, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And so, of course, I applied for it. And I still remember telling the panel how my split post in training had prepared me so wonderfully for this job that was an offer. And also remembering at the same time that I thought I'd never do a split post again. Anyway, that's just how life goes. But the part that I really wanted was the academic bit, because that's what I enjoyed, the teaching and the training. And this was such a golden opportunity, a new school where I actually got to get involved with curriculum development, with delivery, with assessment, and using all these innovative methods. That was a brilliant time. I think I really actually loved my job. And across Norwich PCT and Norwich Medical School, trying to keep both halves joined up, what I enjoyed, I think, was applying academic rigor to policy development and to public health advice to commissioning at the PCT, but equally being able to bring those examples from my own practice into my academic teaching. And so I think the topics, the examples were topical, but equally I think I was able to demonstrate real clinical relevance to the medical students because they were topical contemporary examples. And I quite enjoyed that role. And in fact, what I enjoyed most was I felt like I was bridging that gap between academic and service public health. Because typically, people are either one or the other. And I thought I had this interesting mix of both. You might be honorary at one end and kind of not really be based there. But I was actually 50% in each job. So it was, a nice time. I had a very interesting, multiple roles and things to do. And I started getting interested in medical education as a discipline. And this was largely because of Sam Leinster, who's been a great mentor to me over the past few years. And then I started doing the MClinEd degree. And when I completed that MClinEd degree, I remember thinking at that time that it felt completely like 2 full-time jobs, at either end. And I suppose the upside of that was that I became a master juggler, learning to keep several balls up at the same time. Anyway, moving on. So this is me now. That last reorganization, and we had many of those actually in my public health career in this country. Every time there was a reorganization, it felt a bit like musical chairs. Public health had to move somewhere else. And the chairs kept getting taken off, so there were less and less chairs and less public health people in service public health. And that's how it feels today to me. Anyway, so I became a full-time academic. And so my role largely is as a medical educator, working mostly across the MBBS and the MClinEd program at the medical school, and holding several senior leadership roles. But also, I think, as still a public health specialist, working across academic public health and a little bit with the NHS, giving careers advice to medical students, but also supervising public health trainees within our training program. They keep me on my toes, but I love it. I see myself as an early adopter of technology. I like trying new things, but also a lifelong learner because, these days you've got to keep your skills sharp. And then I like doing faculty development. I run a lot of courses on the FutureLearn platform and other face-to-face courses. And my passion is mentoring junior medical educators. Okay, so I want to now move on to 2 areas that I'm really passionate about. The first is, of course, my public health specialty, and public health particularly in the undergraduate medical curriculum. I think the drive to seed public health into the minds of medical students, that's what really gets me going, because I think they actually need that to be able to graduate feeling empowered and feeling like they can be advocates for their patients. because only then will they be able to actually change the health needs of the community that they serve. Because they are really powerful as advocates. And it's just getting students to realize that, and that's the thing I love. So if we can do a little bit of that for every medical student, that's great. And I hope some of them will join the specialty. But I can't expect, much as I'd love to, I can't expect all of them to want to do public health. But I think that's what gets me going. And through my work with FEMS, the public health educators in medical schools, this is a network we set up maybe about 10 years ago, and it's still running. It's a group of public health leads in every medical school in the UK. We meet each year, we share best practice, we peer support each other, we mentor the new educators who join the network. And with them, we've done lots of interesting work in public health in the medical curriculum. Now, although many national organizations have been talking about strengthening public health or the need to strengthen public health in the medical curriculum, because of all the demographic changes on the horizon and everything like that, we know that there are several challenges that public health faces in medical schools. So unlike the clinical specialties, there are hardly any opportunities to do placements for public health. And so how would medical students know what public health looks like or feels like? How would they know whether they wanted to study it if they don't get a chance to do a placement in it? The other thing is, public health is and is not in assessments, depending on which school you are in. And if assessment drives learning, why would students want to study public health if it's not in their assessments? Is it not not important enough to assess? The mind boggles. Anyway, and of course, the poor profile of the specialty among medical students. So, instead of looking at these just as challenges, perhaps it's an opportunity for us to reshape how we think and how we deliver public health in medical schools. So if there aren't placements, could we just organize at least voluntary placements, maybe with local authorities, the voluntary sector, offer them more student-selected components in things like global health, health inequalities, topics that students love, and to include it in assessments. What better way, I think, than to demonstrate that it is clinically relevant? And if we can do that, then that's a bona fide way to bring it into assessment, isn't it? So that's how I see it, at least. And poor profile, a good role model or two won't hurt. And some faculty development, I think, to have inspiring, passionate teachers who can teach the subject. It is a difficult subject to teach. And so we have to recognize faculty development is important. So connecting the clinical skills and experiences of students to their socio-political and environmental context and giving them a broader understanding of their professional role in society, I think not only enriches the MBBS course, but actually has better outcomes and produces fit-for-purpose graduates. Now, in 2014, FEMS collaborated with the Faculty of Public Health to develop this consensus curriculum for medical schools. What we did was we used the GMC's learning outcomes for public health. We looked at possible curricular content, and then we started to look at processes and resources that were needed to deliver and assess it in that way. And we provided several examples of best practice so that schools had a document to work to and had a practical idea of how to make it happen. And so we think for the first time, actually, we tried to make this something that we could help all the schools to use and for the GMC to use for their visits as well, something to measure against. And so FEMS has done a lot of work like this in sort of extending, I think, and publicizing, activities related to student assessment, teaching, and also engagement of students. And I think FEMS has been at the forefront of publishing and sort of extending the scholarship of public health education in the general medical education circles, which is a tough act. Anyway, moving on then, this is my other passion. So this is the second topic I wanted to talk to you about today, and you'll recognize some people here. So if you think of medical education as a discipline, again, so many challenges, and this is what you hear all the time. Why does everybody have to teach? They are rubbish at it. Can we not have the good ones teaching? So there's a variable interest in teaching. People have variable opportunities to develop themselves. And if you look at medical education careers pathways, there isn't one. It's just, people come into it by accident, some by design, and others by just, because there's nobody else to do it. So they have to do it. And we recognize all these pressures. Anyway, in 2012, the GMC came out with this new guidance, which was for the first time saying that we have to have systems in place to recognize and approve all supervisors of postgraduate medical trainees. Now, it's not that they didn't have supervisors before, but for the first time, we had to have a system for recognizing and approving these trainers to do that job. So at that time, I remember thinking, bigger picture-wise, suddenly it just felt like there were so many opportunities. We know that all doctors are expected to teach. We know that because the GMC has always said that. We know that all trainees now need supervisors. And we now know that supervisors need training. So what better way, that was a brilliant opportunity at the time. And I kept thinking, here's an opportunity for us to introduce something in, maybe from MBBS right up to the consultant level. And so I started thinking about developing careers in medical education. Now, at that time, there was a new kid on the block in education. So massive open online courses had arrived. And I don't know how much you know about massive open online courses or MOOCs, but they were originally designed to make learning accessible to the masses. So they were these massive courses. All you needed was an internet connection. Literally, that's all you needed. And a username and an email address and a password, and you were in it. And there were hundreds of MOOCs to choose from, so many subjects. They were open access. I could do it at my own pace, nobody chasing me to submit things. And there were several platforms, actually. So Coursera, Udacity, edX, and our very own FutureLearn. So UEA was one of FutureLearn's first partners, I think. Okay, there were lots of disadvantages. We do know that learning in a public space can feel threatening if you've got thousands of learners there. And when there's too much choice, you just don't know what to pick. So I think there were some downsides also. Now, I told you already, I am an early adopter. So when I was offered this chance to create a MOOC, of course I jumped for it. The UEA motto, do different. I thought, why not? Now, I was a little bit worried about rocking that medical education boat, but only about 5 minutes, I think, no longer than that. I just thought, right, let's do it. But to do it, I had to do a lot of background research. So I did a lot of MOOCs myself. I signed up to several on different platforms, tried to get a feel for which ones work, which ones don't, which ones come across as better, what is more attractive to me. There was also this thing about dropout rates in MOOCs. So I started to study about, do we know when that dropout occurs? And it sort of happens around the 3-week period. So I thought, right, I know, our MOOC's got to be shorter than that to keep everyone there. So it was things like that, and thinking, what will we teach, and who will be our learners, and how will we attract them to the course? There was no faculty development course as a MOOC at the time, so I had nowhere to draw on, but there were lots of things I could learn from other MOOCs. Anyway, we decided to go ahead then and create a 2-week MOOC on the FutureLearn platform, and we designed it particularly for busy health professionals because we knew the audience we were catering for. We tried to capitalize on the GMC guidance as a policy driver because we knew that would interest people. And of course, looked at my own awareness of training needs through my role as a supervisor. And we thought about 4 hours a week might be something we could expect from that kind of health professional. We knew we couldn't expect more than that because they're already doing busy shifts. And then, once we knew it was going to be 2 weeks long, we thought, right, now what do we put in it? What do we cover in the course? And trying to find that learning need, I thought, what better way than to ask supervisors themselves? So I turned to social media, as one does, and asked people, what would you like to learn? Which 2 areas do you find most challenging? Now, through social media, through all my personal networks, what was surprising for me, wherever in the world the supervisors were, the 2 areas they all found challenging were exactly the same. So giving feedback and identifying and supporting and managing trainees in difficulty. So I thought, right, there's 2 topics. I've got 2 weeks, job done. I now have to create the course. So we went on to look at the course, and we got hold of some experienced educators, started thinking about ideas of how to get this across, and we were determined that we'd have real supervisors, real trainees in the videos, no actors in there. So you can see Emily in the audience was our learner who gave us the learner input and helped us to see what's important from the foundation doctor side or the registrar side. We tried to build really strong theory-practice links. We had articles, videos, animations to increase the variety. And we had plenty of opportunities for interaction. So in our discussion boards, we had questions that I think allowed people to explore or to reflect on what they'd done in the past, but also with the new knowledge to share how they were going to change their practice. And I think that was really fascinating to see how people sort of responded to all those offers of interaction. And of course, there were some end-of-week assessments. We've already established that assessment drives learning. Right, so we ran the first run of this course, and this was the first MOOC that we did completely in-house. And Alicia's here. If you remember at the time, there was a lot of skepticism about whether we were going to be able to do this job because all of the filming and the productions had been done external to UEA in the past. But I mean, Alicia's team, they're great. And so we had a fantastic course ready to go, all done at UEA. We've had 17 runs to date. We've had over 20,000 people signed up to the course. More than 8,000 have been really active learners. And look, they came from over 193 countries and dependencies all around the world. So that's the worldwide reach of that MOOC now, 17 runs later. As you can see, the largest percentage, the biggest bubble is over the UK, and these are all our supervisors from the UK. But I mean, this was, it was fantastic and so rewarding to see the extent to which it has been used. And who were these learners? I mean, age-wise, somewhere between 26 and 56, the average supervisor sort of age. Nearly half of them had postgraduate degrees. They were all in full employment. We knew that already. We wanted them to be trained. But there were people who were in part-time work or not in work doing it because they wanted to improve their career prospects. And that's why they hoped doing this training upfront would help them. A majority were women. And in terms of professions, now when we designed the MOOC, we designed it for doctors. And as soon as the trailer was released, I started getting a barrage of emails from people asking, I'm not a doctor, but can I do the course? Do you think it'll work for me? And so we tweaked the course again to make it relevant for all healthcare professionals who have students or trainees in their clinical placements. So we thought, well, why should it matter? If we create the course such that, generically it's useful to other professions, why not, extend a welcome to them as well? And we had to acknowledge our international learners, because there are some countries where these courses weren't available. So of course for them, this was the only training that was available. So we had this whole variety of professionals in there, which, it was great to see all these professions. The thing that was in common was the bit in the middle. They were all either educators or wanting to be educators. Yeah, so when we asked our learners in the post-course survey, what did you like about the course? They loved the course materials. They particularly liked the animations and the very short videos because they said it brought the whole content to life. They liked the discussion between experts and, of course, transcripts and downloads. So I distilled some information and created downloads for them, little tables that they could have crib sheets in their pockets and things on the wards that they might be able to use. And they loved that. So here's some learner feedback, and I'll give you a few minutes to read it. A few seconds. I think what you can see in here is this thing about mentorship of learners. It's already coming through even through the learner feedback. What they were really enjoying was having senior educators, having us all participating in the discussions with them. That's what they like best. Okay, so overall impression then, it really actually met the identified learning needs, obviously, because they told me that that's what they find most difficult, so obviously they loved it. It suited their busy lifestyles, and the thing about the Future Learn courses is it's built in steps. And if you have small steps that you can accomplish at the end of a busy shift, that's actually what our learners were doing. They said they didn't mind doing it because they had small steps to complete. So each day, at the end of a busy shift, they were cooking, putting their kids to bed, telling us that they were going to come back and do a couple of steps on the MOOC. And this is what they enjoyed, that they could actually do it from their mobiles, from their couches, from their beds, wherever they were waiting at the bus stop. They actually told us that they found really useful because it was in tiny bite-sized steps that they could complete as and when they were available or free to do it. And what it did was create a nice international community of learners who were all engaged with each other, discussing issues which transcend boundaries, really. And the interesting thing was they really enjoyed the interprofessional learning. Now, for those of you who set up interprofessional learning, you know how hard it can be to actually make it work, truly make it work, rather than people resenting it because you're forcing them to do it. Now here, we hadn't set it up for this, but this is the bit that they really loved. They loved actually learning from each other, because when it boils down to it, you know, we all have a shared goal, don't we? The educator in the middle. So that probably is why they really enjoyed that. Now, over the various runs of the MOOC, you know, I was tracking what was happening in terms of the MOOC. And in those days, you know, looking at those bars, social learners, they're learners who interact with other people, who like comments or who post comments on the discussion board and so on, and completers, those who've completed the course. Every time the social learning proportion went up, the completers went up. And when social learning dropped, completion rates dropped. So I started wondering whether there was any relationship with social learning and completion rates. And I mean, if you look at literature, educational literature, there's a lot of literature and educational theory supporting that sort of shared learning, social learning, building online communities of practice, the ability to learn, you know, for junior educators to sort of have their hands held by more senior educators and explaining things to them. And the shared goal, which is the learner in the center, you know, it's common to all professions. So, you know, probably it does help, and it does, you know, social learning does help complete a course. Now, I'm an epidemiologist, and I know that you can't judge by aggregate data. Of course, we need to look at data at an individual level, perhaps, and look at whether social learners are more likely to be completers, or whether completers are more likely to be social learners. But that's work for another day. So, you know, it was true for all our learners, I think, that social learning played a really key role in making the experience great for them. That's what they said sort of came out through all of their feedback. And, you know, as they say, it was of as much value as the course material itself. So there is potentially an opportunity there to learn from each other, apart from learning from the course. So, encouraged by the success of that MOOC, we created 3 new MOOCs on the back of it, all sort of looking at the entire supervisor role and trying to make sure we had something that addressed all of those, because I knew that there were big gaps in the market. And, you know, look at this. We've only had a few runs of the course, you know, already active learners, over 2,000 of them. And, you know, people are actually enjoying these courses. Many people tell us that it's the first time they've come across a course like this. There isn't a course like this in their country. And it feels so rewarding, actually, to be able to be providing this kind of training and opportunities for people who don't have access to such courses. So for that part of MOOCs, you know, I'm really grateful, because that's great. You've made learning accessible through MOOCs. Yeah, so here's feedback from the most recent run of one of those courses. As you can see, it is really overwhelming, and I think when I read the feedback from the learners, it's really gratifying to see that the hard work you've put in to making that course actually makes it all worthwhile, and it feels like it has worked so well. So, not happy with just doing my own little courses. Last year, we had another big initiative in 2017. I led, supported and mentored really a whole group of educators, some of whom are in the audience. And we created a whole lot of new courses on the FutureLearn platform. And it wasn't just creating them on the FutureLearn platform that was the useful thing. It was upskilling people into creating online learning. But equally, I think giving them the opportunity to use those skills in teaching students here, you know, our normal day-to-day teaching job. And I think that has helped everybody to do that. All our courses probably are better for having done all of this work. Yes, we had our problems. You know, nothing like this is easy. It was a massive task with a tight deadline, but we got there in the end. And actually, it has been a benefit for all of us, I think, to learn from what we've done, even if it was to learn what not to do next time. And I think we really could not have done this without the help of Alicia McConnell and her lovely Center for Technology Enhanced Learning, Stephen Amis, all of the other learning technologists and learning designers who helped us really to make learning accessible to the learners. And that's what I enjoy most about working with CTEL. It is this ability that they have. You know, I give them the content, some ideas, and then they make it happen. And it's like magic when it works. You know, everyone loves the animations. We keep playing them over and over again in every course I do. And people always come up to me afterwards and say, that was great. You know, how did you do that? I didn't, they did. Anyway, but yeah, thank you. That was really a lot of hard work for the department, but they did a good job. So what next? I think we are definitely going to do some qualitative and quantitative analysis of the data sets. We've got masses of data and not enough time. So I need to do some data analysis. We are going to do a follow-up study of learners. And then what I'd really like to do is create a MOOC to online master's pathway. Now, just imagine you have a busy learner who can only do bite-sized courses, as they've done for my courses. Why don't we have bite-sized courses that they can complete, put together, progress to an online module, and then progress to an online PG certificate, and with no time at all, they'll be doing an online master's. I think we need to think about this a little bit more. So it's not that MOOCs were expected, well, people expected MOOCs to bring people to the campus. My view is that MOOCs cater to a completely different learner. They are the learners who have no geographical boundaries or who don't fit within those boundaries, who don't want to sit on a bench or a campus seat. They want to do it online. That's why they're doing MOOCs. And so I think we've got to be able to have an online learning component for them to come into. Because when we have looked at it, the footfall coming from the MOOC into our online courses, when we had a failed trial some years ago, has been great. So, I still hope, I really hope we can do this. There are some universities that already offer nano degrees, online programs, and so on. Maybe we could do this. Really, let me try it. Anyway, I've said enough. So, from the online courses, everything we learned has been used time and time again in my face-to-face training. So at the time, within the public health training program, we did some supervisor development, and then that spread. We did it in the local acute trusts, then the mental health care trust, and very soon we are just going to, in May, we are going to launch a Health Education England-funded supervisor training project here at UEA. So it's been brilliant that we've been able to bring all those experiences and draw on them and offer them to our face-to-face training courses. And I think we use the resources as well. So, anything we created in an online environment is repurposed in our face-to-face courses. So thereby, you're making a lot of use and it's much more efficient. So remember I told you about unclear career pathways in medical education. I think it's beginning to come to fruition here locally on a small scale, local level. In the undergraduate course, we already offer a student-selected component for medical education in year 3, which used to run full in the first few years we ran it. We have about 10 or 15 students each year. We now have an intercalated degree, so the students can intercalate after year 4, usually, and they come and complete the full-time master's and go back. We've got 10 or 15 students doing it each year. And then as you go through it, we've got 3 academic clinical fellows in medical education now. We've got supervisors training to do their supervision. We've also got a part-time, PG certificate, diploma, full-time master's, combination of part-time and full-time courses. So there is actually everything, there's something available along that entire career pathway. The missing link, which was the foundation year 2 post, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, maybe you can see it there. It's the medical education foundation year 2 posts. Next year, we are going to be getting 8 candidates to do PG Cert in ClinEd from FY2. So, there'll be 4 in Kings Lynn and 4 at Ipswich Hospital. So that missing link even sort of has been completed. So I feel I feel grateful that with all of these efforts of various people, we have been able to have, at least at the local level, an opportunity for anybody who's interested in developing a career in medical education. And what about my own career? That's what it looks like, starting off as a medical student a very long time ago, and sort of at the other end, professor, but still lifelong learner. And I think I'll always stay like that, a lifelong learner, but that's, I think that's the same for all of us, isn't it? Now, it looks lovely and smooth. I can tell you for sure it was anything but that. This is how it felt like most of the time, every time I got somewhere, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, that kind of thing. And these snakes have lovely, friendly faces. So big difference, I think. Sorry, couldn't help making that joke. So to recap then, career aspirations-wise, where did I start? I actually remember wanting to be a teacher at the age of 5 to 6 years old. I had fabulous role models in my school, and there was a particular teacher I thought when I grow up, I am going to be like her. So I remember clearly this teacher in my primary school always wanted to teach. Then in high school, I think I realized quite quickly that I needed to be in a caring profession because I like helping others and doing all these lovely things. And I thought, right, that's what I'm going to be. I am going to be a medic. And then fast forward, I have done other things in between. But look, I'm a teacher and a public health doctor. So I've been fortunate, actually, to be able to combine my first two ambitions all those years ago and still stay with them to the very end. So it feels great that I've been able to sort of keep to that, to what I aspired towards. So I wanted to give some advice to budding medical educators now. Get as much experience as you can. It is a craft. You learn as you go on, put the effort in, and you will get the results. So get as much experience. You don't stop learning, really, you don't stop learning. Expand your educator toolbox. Every time you go to some good lecture, you see something good, put that in your toolbox. Keep those tricks up your sleeve. I still learn when I do peer observation, always pinching other people's ideas. When they work, why not, So expand your toolbox. Make education learner-centered. It's all about the learner. You're just there to facilitate the learning. It's the learner who's important, not you, really. Reflective practice, practice makes perfect. We know that. Think about what works, what doesn't, and evaluate all your educational activities. So if things aren't working, you can change. Persevere, develop resilience. I can't emphasize this enough, honestly. Nothing in life is ever smooth. And not, definitely not a career in medical education. It is tough, but persevere, you will get there in the end. Identify a good mentor. Use their expertise wisely. Never underestimate the value of a mentor. Find somebody you respect, you want to learn from, and use their expertise. I'm sure they'll be really willing to help. Who doesn't want to, mentor juniors? And be prepared to be a lifelong learner. We know that now. You just have to be lifelong because, things change, technology changes. You have to keep abreast of all of it, and so be prepared for that. And above all, pedagogy before technology. Remember that. So it's time for me to say thank you. And, I'm really grateful to so many people, friends, family, colleagues, students, and all the lovely folk who have helped me to get to where I am today. I don't think I could have done it without your help. So I am very grateful to everybody. Thank you so much. And I really need to make a special mention of two people, my daughters, Sancha and Naida, neither of whom could be here today. They've assured me they're watching the live stream, so I hope they are. Anyway, so Naida and Sancha, if you're watching, you've often actually been on the wrong side of my work-life balance. For that, I'm sorry. But I hope I've been a good role model to you, in the end. And thank you for all your support over the years. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Second glass. Sorry.
Right. Questions, please, on this excellent lecture. Who's going to be first? Thank you, Rosalind.
Rina, thank you very much. I have two questions because your presentation had two halves.
Yeah.
The first is, let us remember this, your public health issue with public health placements.
Yeah.
Would it not be possible to meet the public health outcomes, stroke objectives, without going to a specific public health placement? And the second question, are all MOOCs free?
Okay, I'll answer the second question first because that's easier. MOOCs are free as far as the learning is concerned. And I have to actually clarify this to several consultants when we teach. The learning is free. If you want a certificate at the end, that costs. Now, for most people who are learning for fun or even learning for CPD purposes, we don't have to submit certificates anymore. We have to reflect on whatever you've learned. So it works. But if you want the certificate, and some people have said, well, why would you do the course if you didn't want a certificate? And I think because you wanted to learn? No. So anyway, so that answers your question, I think. the first question about public health outcomes, I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. I suppose you can meet public health learning outcomes. You know, you've got to be clever about looking at other sessions. So for example, heart disease, you know, I can sneak in some slides on prevention. We can talk about smoking cessation, stuff like that. So we have tried to do that with our clinical colleagues. But you see, for students to know whether it is the specialty they want to to sort of think about careers in, how would they know if they didn't do a placement in it or get a feel for what it's like to work in public health? That would be difficult, I think. So there are some number of outcomes I think you can meet with joint working across other specialties, but there are other things that you probably can't. And those are the ones where you might organize voluntary placements or have opportunities like that. So we've got loads of interest here in public health, and we try really hard to work with our service public health colleagues to see whether we can send them on placements, even if it's a week or 2 weeks, you know, to see whether they can get a feel for that. So just to do a taster in the subject. And then in the electives, that's another opportunity to send students to public health placements.
The reason I ask that is that it's such an important agenda and looks like it's going to be even more important in the next 5 years. And speaking selfishly, for the non-medical professions, the only way those disciplines are going to get a real grasp of public health is to look at the principles and the concepts and implement and apply those in any area they're working in. Yeah,
and that's why I was talking about seeding public health into the minds of the clinicians. And that's the thing, if they graduate from medical school having some idea of public health, I think, you know, that bigger picture, population health, it takes time, doesn't it? It requires some maturity of thinking. I think it needs some years of clinical practice till you start sort of forming that bigger picture in your mind. And that does happen. But, you know, you ask a third-year student about being an advocate for public health, and they think, what? No. You know, but that's what they will be eventually. Whatever specialty they choose, they will be an advocate for their patients. It's just very early in their career for them to recognize it. So I think if you start seeding it in a small way in their minds, there's some chance that one day they'll wake up and think, oh, I remember what they said. You know, there are loads of people who meet us now, even about research methods, what they hate, you know, the thing they hate most in medical school, I think, or find most challenging. They say now to me, you know, I wish I'd paid more attention in school. God knows when I really need it. You know, so it's one of those things they realize eventually. Okay.
Further questions? Good.
And I was thinking about your motto, pedagogy before technology, which seems to imply that there are certain users of technology that could actually interfere with learning rather than help. And I was wondering if you can expand a little bit on what these dangers could be.
Yeah, I think the first thing, the reason I say this is first you've got to think about, you know, what is it you're seeking to deliver, or what is the problem, or is there a problem even? And then you can use technology sometimes to fix the problem, but sometimes technology can be the problem. I think you can't rely heavily on technology to deliver your message. You've got to think about the pedagogy. What is it you're trying to teach? What's the best way to teach it? And can we then use technology to enhance that? I think that is a thing. And there are some things technology can do that you can't do. So things like, you know, using audience response systems, things like that, where you get students completely engaged. You're using that to engage the students. I could ask the students questions, but they don't all answer. So this is something you can use to actually boost that up. But you're first thinking about, I want interaction with my students. That's the pedagogy. And then you're thinking, how can I do it? And then you use technology to make it even better. So I think that's what I'm trying to say. So think of the pedagogy clearly. You know, what is it you're going to teach? What's the best way to teach it? How do you make them engaged and happy learners? And then also assessment. And then use technology to sort of bring that all together, to facilitate it, to extend it, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Suzanne.
Yeah. Yeah, Alicia's nodding here. You know, when we first started the MOOC, they used to keep saying, oh, you look at your learners, they're happily discussing things among themselves. Why do you feel the need to be on the discussion boards all the time? I think when you set up a new course, you want to be there because you want to check that it's all working. The thing to do, I think, is to set it up in such a way that they can all work with each other. So it's the, it's the way you tweak those discussion board questions, the way you set up your, the sort of steps in the MOOC or any course that makes them discuss with each other. So rather than forcing, saying, discuss it with at least 2 other people, I think if you frame the questions such that people are drawing on their experience in the light of what they've learned, you get lots of discussion. Who doesn't like to talk about themselves? They keep telling us about all those wonderful times they've tried it and it's gone so badly, and what they'll do differently this time, stuff like that. So I think once I was sure that the courses were working smoothly and the learners were actually happily discussing with each other, I think I felt, okay, maybe I can look the other way for 5 minutes. Nothing happened. The discussion boards flourished, everyone was happy. There was only one run, Emily's probably noticed, where we had one comment saying, haven't seen the educators on the discussion boards, and I thought, oh, that was that week when I had, zillions of things happening at the same time. And these days, because I've got 4 courses which run 4 times a year, if Stephen doesn't remind me my course is running, I can forget quite easily. But when I remember, I do always make an effort to go to the discussion boards because that's what they like. They love the mentorship. They like the learners interacting with them, with the educators. They like that sort of having the educator there. Nothing goes wrong. And sometimes they will answer questions and they'll wait till I come in to check, confirm, she said, that kind of thing. And it's rewarding for me. But also, I think the courses are set up so they can really run on their own pretty much, really. That's how they're engineered.
Savina, can I ask, how often have you had to go in and review the course and change the courses?
Yeah.
Obviously, you've had a lot of feedback,
yeah.
which looks like it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah.
But how often have you then said, okay, we need to go in and start changing this? It's such a short course.
That's true. I think the only tweaks we've really made is when we found links that were broken. That's really the most common thing, and it's not so often either. And the learners are quick to tell us that link's not working, and then a quick message to CTEL, and somebody changes it, and done. So they're happy with that. And sometimes some resources that I'd cited, because they have to be all open access resources, are no longer available, and then I have to quickly look for something else. But in the main, I think we've never had negative feedback to the point where we've ever had to change anything. In fact, the only negative feedback, couple of things. One was the charges for the certificate that somebody didn't like, and the other time was when somebody said the course was too easy. So I had a little sort of discussion with them saying, well, what were you expecting? They said, well, I've got a master's in the subject. This is way too easy. And I thought, well, this is not for you. Clearly, you've got a master's degree. You shouldn't be on this course. This is for people who need training. You're above that already. So it was that kind of stuff. I don't think I've ever seen anything negative. I don't know, Emily, I'm looking at you here, whether you've seen anything on the discussion boards.
Sometimes there are people who are very, very experienced and
Yeah.
still like to share
Yeah.
and use the discussion boards. And you can learn, like, for the interprofessional learning, I think nursing and psychology have a very different supervisory
Yeah.
component, and there's a lot that medics can learn from that.
Yeah, I think I have learned so much from creating that MOOC. What I learned was medics are no good at supervision. It came from nursing. I mean, the models I picked, Proctor's model from nursing. Medics are looking at me and thinking, what, models of supervision? No idea. So that's what we had to sort of talk to them about. Giving feedback. Everybody thought, oh, well, we just give feedback. There are models for giving feedback. Hang on a minute, I didn't know there were models for giving feedback. So I learned so much in trying to create this course for others. And I think I've been pleasantly surprised that so far we've only had minor tweaks, when other healthcare professionals said, please, can we do your MOOC? It looks like it'll be interesting. And the thing is, many of them have written to me, especially to tell me that it's been way better than the face-to-face courses they've done. I can't, that's just, for me, that's great to hear feedback for educators, but they do, people email me all the time and tell me this. It's great to find a course like this. Had no idea that these courses are available. I'm the first woman surgeon in my country, a head of department, and I had no idea. Thank you for the course. It just feels nice that in countries where they don't have training like this, they've been able to access it. But it's been equally well used. I think it's now on the recommended training list for many of the deaneries, what used to be deaneries in this country, definitely. So it's a go-to place for supervisor training.
A question here?
Yes, I have a question. So I obviously know that your course is one of the most successful we've got and one of FutureLearn's most successful ones. But how did you think to yourself, this is going to be, there is a market
first started it, it was my own knowledge as a supervisor, things that are lacking, that we know we could do. But I think it was the temptation of creating a MOOC more than anything. If you remember going back, there was the attempt to create UEA Health Online. And it was offered to me as an opportunity to publicize an online module I was going to create for clinical supervisors. Now, it came the wrong way around because the module hadn't been created yet, and yet this was going to advertise it. So I thought, well, I've got a clean slate. What do I start with? So they gave me those 2 topics. And because they came from the learners, I knew that that was a gap. I knew this from my own experience. But of course, the module never took off, but this course did. So, things have a weird way of working, haven't they? So that's what I meant by trials and tribulations. I made it sound all successful. No, there were some other things that I didn't tell you about that didn't work. We tried, they didn't work for various reasons. Not my fault, mostly. Mostly not my fault. Anyway.
Any other questions? No? There's one there. I'll take this as the last question.
Well, first of all, so I'm an economist here, and the preamble to my question is that I strongly believe that you shouldn't celebrate your ability as a medical educator, but as an educator who wanted to engage with other disciplines, with other way of teaching. And this is my thank you to you, because I learned a lot out of you, despite the fact that I don't teach anything related to medicine whatsoever. And this is great. So my question is related to this, and is a genuine, curious, not leading question. What do you think medical education can teach to other disciplines? What do you do better than us? And what do you think, what do you envy to other disciplines?
Yeah.
That you think they cracked it better than what medical education actually does?
You're not allowed to say everything.
I know. The thing with Fabio, I think I agree with you on that, and that's why you teach on IMClinEd course, because my point is, you can learn to be a good teacher from anywhere. You don't need to be a medical educator. And in fact, some of my best learning has come from, people who are so famous, people who do all these talks in secondary school, primary school. If you look at my Twitter feed, you'll probably see all my, the people I follow and the people who follow me are from all sorts of educational institutions, because I believe education is a technique to facilitate learning, and you can use it wherever. I mean, I'm not so precious that I would think that we are any different to anybody else, but there's so much we can learn, which is why I was trying to show this to our students by bringing people like Simon Lancaster from chemistry, yourself, Helena Gillespie, other people to come and teach, because I wanted students to learn that you can learn from any teacher. It doesn't have to be a medical educationalist. What do we do better or differently? I think through years of hard discipline, you'll see in our MOOC, the completion rates were one of the highest of all MOOCs on FutureLearn, because I think medics are like that. When they take on something, they take it and they will finish it, because we're so competitive. We must finish and we must win, and fastest and highest and best. So I think that's what medical educationalists are like. So probably that's what it is. They will give it their full, if they're interested in it, they will just give it their full effort. I think at least that's something that I'm seeing, and definitely our completion rates were one in the sort of top 20 of the MOOCs that FutureLearn runs, definitely on this course. And I used to keep thinking about this and thinking, why are they so high? Well, because they want to complete it. Once you start, they don't start unless they're really going to do it. That sort of thing. Or they'll recognize that, no, this is not the right time for me, and they won't do it. But once they start it, they will finish it, because you can't leave it unfinished. You've got to get there in the end. I don't know if that answers all of your question.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's been a tour de force. It's been wonderful hearing about your life and how your career developed. It's good to see that coming to Norwich doesn't destroy ambition.
Yes, well, hands up, anybody who thought that I should have listened to them.
There's plenty of people in the audience that will look at your enthusiasm, be inspired by it. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to thank, with me again, Veena for a most superb lecture. Last thing I have to tell you is there should be some drinks and nibbles outside, and please stay and engage in some conversation. You can ask Veena some more tricky questions that you may not have wanted to ask in open court. Thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, lovely.